Welcome back to another edition of Everything Football 62. I'm your Jonathan Big Tech Johnson, aka Uncle Tex, aka Professor Tex. It's been a little bit. Before we start, hit that like button, subscribe to the page, and we're going to get rolling with this. September 7th, 1963 was the inaugural class of the Pro Football Hall of Fame grand opening or the enshrinees. That was the first time that they was enshrining players in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at that particular time. That's going on almost 60, getting close to right at 60 years that the Pro Football Hall of Fame has been open. It also, if you go back to September 17th, I'm going to say 1920, we're about in the 101st year, on the 102nd year of NFL being founded. So you have a Hall of Fame that is 50-something, that is almost 60 years old, right at 60 years old. And you also have a game that has been played for that of 100 years. So if you guys go back to one of my first broadcasts that I did, it had to deal with the Hall of Fame. I'm big on the Hall of Fame type stuff, and I've been critical, especially since when they had the 100th year anniversary. They had all like 20 guys go on that thing, and what are the credentials of a Hall of Famer? Like, you look at the class that they have coming in here now. You have Tony Baselli, right? I did a piece on Tony Baselli. You can look it up and what I said about him. I figured they was going to eventually put him in because everything just kind of just started being this thing about he needs to be in this, and all this other stuff. He would have did this, he would have did that if he would have played, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just kept getting louder and louder, so to the point when they went on and put him in and whatnot. You have Tony Baselli, you have Cliff Branch, Leroy Butler, Art McNally, Sam Mills, Richard Seymour, Dick Vermeil, Brian Young, and these guys, with the exception of Cliff Branch, because I spoke of Cliff Branch. Now, granted, we have to also remember this. One of the things we're talking about eras, right? Compared like eras. So somebody like Cliff Branch came in the league in like 73 and played to like 1983, to like 84 or something like that, right? So his time was basically during the 70s and part of the 80s, right? And those line of wide receivers that played in the 70s compared to receivers that played in the 60s or the 50s or the 50s or 40s and 30s, there really was no comparison. Now, you may did more to put them in the hall based upon several different things. But like I said, Cliff Branch should have went in the same time that John Stallworth and the same time that Lynn Swann went in. And it took a while for those guys actually to get into the Hall of Fame. But Cliff Branch should have been right there. He has more hardware per se. He's only missing one ring less than that Stallworth and Swann. Okay, but Branch should have been in. And I really don't like when these guys, because you don't know when a person's going to pass and all this other kind of stuff. And this is the thing, just like I don't believe in the old timers committee. I don't believe in, like I said, if you haven't made it, you have, like I say, 3 tries, because I guess the podium of it is being the first ballot Hall of Famer, second ballot Hall of Famer, third ballot Hall of Famer. After the third ballot Hall of Famer, in my estimation at that time, if you haven't made it by your third time, then you couldn't have been one of the baddest jokers that walking on the planet playing ball at the time. Like Deion Sanders said recently, you got the Hall of Fame, you got the Hall of Game, and then you have the Hall of Fame. And this class that they have coming in, solid players. But like I said, Baselli, the trajectory of what he was going to be, not what he did for a couple of years and whatnot. Now, like I said, did a piece on it. All his contemporaries, all those guys played and did everything. His contemporaries, go look them up. Walter Jones, all them guys like that. Go look up all them guys and what I talked about. And they did it, and they first battled Hall of Famers. You want to eventually put him in? Fine. Okay, then that's how you go about doing it. But it's like, I don't like the way it's going down and whatnot. Cliff Branch, like I said, I told you, LeBron Butler, hell of a player, fine safety and everything, like 4-time Pro Bowler. Think he might have was All Pro 2 or 3 times or something to that effect, and everything with him. Lambeau Leap, got a couple of trips to Super Bowl, got a Super Bowl ring and stuff like that. But when you think of dominant safeties, do you really think of LeRoy Butler? Nah, he was good. You don't think of that. Don't know nothing about Art McDowell, even some referee or something like that. Sam Mills. I mean, this was always a thing because the field mice his game. I loved his game and everything like that. They call him the field mice because he was short as cat out there, but I'm like, he had game and stuff like that. I mean, putting him in now, I don't like that. I mean, he may have wasn't one of the best linebackers, but he had game and stuff like that. Should he been in the Hall of Fame? And, it's not about disrespecting him. Just like if he didn't make it. If he didn't make it in the first 3 times, then no. You have a bunch of talented players that play in this league that are not going to be in the Hall of Fame. You can't put everybody in the Hall of Fame. Richard Seymour, hell of a 7-time Pro Bowl, I think 3 or 4 times all Pro first team. But when you think of defensive tackles, dude, I don't really think of him like that. Don't have a lot of sacks and whatnot. I don't think of him like that. He's getting in, I think, at the time that he's supposed to get in, because I'm not saying some of these guys don't deserve it. It wasn't. I just say if you're not a first ballot Hall of Famer, if you're not a second ballot Hall of Famer, you're not a third ballot Hall of Famer, then there's no Hall of Fame. Then you can't be in the Hall of Fame. There's no reason to be in the Hall of Fame. Dick Vermeil, barely over 500 as a coach. He won about in the 15 years, and he stopped and all this thing. He won 10 or more games, I think 5 or 6 times. And whatnot. He's like 120 and 109. I think that's his record. I mean, he's an average coach. He was, he was good. He had some moments. Got a Super Bowl. And I guess you could say he went in at the time. But I'm like, again, if you didn't go in the time in that 9-year period, Bryant Young, I'm like, okay, had some good years. 4-time Pro Bowl. I think he's one-time All-Pro first team. He's got a Super Bowl ring and whatnot. Him and guys like Stubblefield and stuff like that. I mean, yeah. But again, I don't think of them guys like that. I'm not saying he wasn't. He was like that. But I don't think in that essence there, he probably is going in at the time he's supposed to possibly go in, I guess. But, again, that's what I'm saying, man. It's like my criteria is this. And this has always been my criteria. My criteria, you got to at least play a decade. At least. You got to play a decade. You have to dominate your position to be one of the top 3 or 4, top 5 at your position for at least half a decade, which that's 5 years. You need to be putting in work. Playoffs and all this other kind of stuff. Even if you're not in the play, you're a sorry team. Case in point, a guy I know is getting ready to go in the Hall of Fame right next year, the year after next. Joe Thomas, who was the tackle for them dreadful ass Cleveland Brown teams. I mean, that guy was dominant. So hit what bunch of All Pros, bunch of Pro Bowls and stuff like that. Size, he was, and saying he had all that, but on a dreadful team or a dreadful franchise and whatnot. So he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, bar none. All decade team. He's that, and I use him as if I could compare to that. It's just like none of these guys, even with Baselli, that again. Trajectory, I got it, but at the same time, nah, man, it's just like you're gonna put them in, but I'm like after a certain time, no, cut it off. There shouldn't be no old time committees. There should never be another player that they're gonna put in the Hall of Fame who played back in the damn 50s. If he wasn't like that in his time that he played, then he just don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Then you understand what I'm saying? It shouldn't be based upon. I think he should be that, and the guy's like 90 years old, or guys are dead in a lot of cases. Guys are dead, or he played back in the 30s. Dude, are you serious? You know what I'm saying? So no. So I think at a certain time, dude, it shouldn't be that. It's like when I told you about Chuck Howley for the Cowboys. It's like you get his line of work and what he did. And compare it to the linebackers, because outside linebacker really wasn't a thing per se. That was nothing that was in the 50s and 40s and 30s. Might have had some guys standing up there, but there was no positions like that. So Bobby Bell, Dave Robinson, and all them guys started bringing light to that. So Chuck Howley, who for whatever reason they don't want to admit with Chuck Howley, I'm like, those guys revolutionized the outside linebacker on that 4-3. That brought you over into the 70s. Now compared to say, so those guys revolutionized that and did that, and somebody like Chuck Howley is not even in the Hall of Fame, which is ridiculous based upon his numbers. That's what I'm saying. So these guys, hardware, play over a decade, be in some big games, do big things in big games on a consistent basis. You follow what I'm saying? And a lot of these guys, sometimes, if you don't do that, if you're not a first ballot, because that's like, first ballot, second ballot, third ballot. If you haven't made it by the third ballot, then you don't need to be in the Hall of Fame. Don't be sitting up there bringing somebody in there 100 years old. Yeah, he was this back in the 1940s and like that or whatever. And guys bringing in guys like Ed Sprinkle and all. I'm like, was he dominant in his era of time that he played? And it's real simple. Did that person dominate in that era, in that decade or so? If they played a half a decade and tailed off and ended up pretty good and whatnot. It's just that simple. Like I tell people all the time, the whole thing about where T.O. went, it was what are you talking about? Second or third time or whatever. He went in with Ray Lewis, and we had to go in there with them because then you could just threw the Hall of Fame in the trash. If he didn't want to put him in there, he was more pissed that he didn't go in the first ballot because he is a first ballot Hall of Famer, bar none. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of these guys that they're putting in, if you're not a if you haven't made it in the Hall of Fame and you've been retired for 35, 40 years and they finally put you in there, it's like, nah. Now some of them guys, it's jacked up. Drew Pearson should have been in there. A while ago, based upon the time period that he played, all the receivers that played in the 70s in that 9-year, and some of them went up in the 80s, but the major wide receivers of the 70s, you can't mention them without mentioning Cliff Branch, Drew Pearson, and guys like Lance Swan, but technically really, and whatnot. Now they threw Harold Carmichael up in there. I'm just like, okay, Harold Carmichael was a 6'8" wide receiver. I'm like, okay, that's all you had, and they put him in. I'm like, where did Hardy? He played a long time, but you look at his numbers, it's like, man, it's like, but put him in anyway. So that's what I'm saying. You can't, when you think of the 70s wide receivers, man, come on, man. Pearson, Branch, Swan, Starwork, that's kind of the guys, but especially like Branch, Speed Kills, Drew Pearson, Hail Mary, those guys was the catalyst of that. There's probably some other guys, Harold Jackson and whatnot, there's some good guys and stuff that they played in the league. But nah, man, all of this waiting 40, 50 years and stuff like that, you know what they did. You have their numbers and everything like that. So all of the games need to stop playing when you start talking about, okay, this guy coming in at this time. I'm like, that's just too much. First ballot, second ballot, third ballot. If you ain't made it in third ballot, then there's no Hall of Fame for you. Because you wasn't, that take that you wasn't a bad player, that just meant that, okay, well, he wasn't one of the baddest guys up in there at that time. And I think they gloss over that because they still be trying to pull players from different eras and this time and that time. No, the 70s and 80s and 90s, all that shit is past. Now you take what did they do compared, and remember, when you start comparing a lot of these players to other older players and whatnot and stuff like that, there's no competition. It doesn't even make sense to say like Don Hudson's era and then Jerry Rice's era. Don Hudson dominated in his era. Kudos. And leave it at that. What other receivers was really in that time that he played? None. So you can't pull anybody from that. So as time goes on, so receivers start getting more and more into the game and whatnot, and Crazy Leg Hurts and all those type of guys, Raymond Berry and all of them, and then the icing on the cake really in the 60s took the wide receiver thing to the next level was guys like with Lance Allwood and Charlie and guys like Charlie Taylor and later on Charlie Taylor and whatnot, Bobby Mitchell. Those guys start taking it to the next level. You know what I'm saying? And then the guys in the 70s, okay, that's who you projected, okay, that's how you're going to be like, okay, like those guys over there, and compare numbers and what they did and whatnot. But if that person was dominant in their position and they did what they were supposed to have done, okay, first ballot, he might be in the first ballot, he's second ballot, third ballot. After then, if you don't make it by your third time, then I don't think you need to be in the Hall of Fame. Then you're just putting anybody in. I mean, I looked at looking at Bryant's numbers and whatnot, it's decent. But guess whose numbers and hardware just as good as his. Daniel Stubblefield, you gonna put him in there next? He had a defensive player of the year. Yeah, he was beasting. You put him in there, 3-time All-Pro, couple times second team, I believe. Defensive player of the year, rookie defensive player of the year. Now we ain't gonna talk about the personal stuff. I ain't gonna get into that crazy. I said, but that's as much stuff as Bryant Young has. Is he gonna be in the Hall? You gonna put him in the Hall of Fame next? So it's real tricky, man, on how that stuff does that, man. So like I said, my credentials, gotta play a decade. Gotta be top dog for about 5 years, and top 5, and 4-5-time All-Pro, couple of second team, whatever the case may be, Pro Bowls, playing big games and do big things consistently. Not somebody to do it for a couple of years and then tail off and have a Pro Bowl here and there and stuff like that. Like somebody asked me about Ashanti Samuels. I'm like, but he made a couple of Pro Bowls, 3 or 4 Pro Bowls. Think he might have made All-Pro once. That was it. I mean, where's that 5 or 6 year run where you are the man? Back when back also when Pro Bowls you had to get up into, not taking nothing from this game. It's guys I look at, my team that I look at, who has that run of like All-Pro, Pro Bowl, All-Pro, first team for 5, 6, 7 years in a row, 5 years in a row. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, some guys won't be like that. Then you have guys got a couple of Pro Bowls, couple first team, second teams, and stuff like that. That might be your second ballot. Then the other guy went to about one Pro Bowl, bunch of second team stuff like that. It was good. Whatever, played in some big game, got a ring, got this, that, and the other. That's it. Then you got the other guys who just like, he played a long time. He was a solid football player and whatnot. Maybe went to 1 or 2 Pro Bowls and stuff like that. And we got an All-Pro and is not one of these times, but that was basically it. He wasn't one of the top dogs in his league. But you don't put him in there just because of that. Like I see some people want to put Jim Marshall in the Hall of Fame because he played 20 years. Jim Marshall had 3 Pro Bowls? That's it in 20 years. And always remember, he didn't have a tackle in Super Bowl 10. And he wasn't one of the most dominant type defensive ends. He was good, but he wasn't a Deacon Jones. He wasn't a Willie Davis. That's who he was. That was his era. He wasn't comparable to those guys. He was good, but he wasn't them guys. And that's what I'm talking about. All right? Like I told you guys, man, like I tell you guys all the time, numbers don't lie and get emotional. People do. And like I say, man, there is no greatest of all time. There is no GOAT as long as time's still going on. We talk to you guys later.